Oh my goodness. Hey, hi, it's Mike. Did you know that Abe and Bridget and me are trying to make a movie right now? Yes, right dang now. It's called Papa Bear and tells the poignant and hilarious true story of the time my dad came out as a gay furry when I was 17. If you care about that at all, please head to seedandspark.com/fund/papa-bear to find out much more about the project, how you can be a part, and earn really cool rewards for helping us out. See you there. Here's your pod. Thanks so much.
I kind of miss DreamWorks' animation style, actually. Like
Yeah?
yeah, I do. I only saw a few DreamWorks animated films in their heyday, but I kind of appreciate that there is a little bit more of a fidelity to realism in some ways than like Pixar. Like it's not as cartoony as Pixar to me. And I don't know if that's
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like obviously they're big cartoons and there's DreamWorks Face, which is like a popular meme.
Right.
Like, there's definitely something of like that's what made them all look the same, and that's an easy to make fun of thing. But they were trying to do something different from like let's reinvent the artistic wheel every time.
There's
That's like a Pixar
texture to them that I feel like you just don't see in movies anymore. Like they definitely have their own, like, you know, it's minor but unique sort of affectation that is missing, and that's kind of unfortunate.
It does make me realize that, like, you know how like golden era of Disney animation, 90s, you know, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, etc.
Yep.
They all had they have a similar look, and there's something about the legacy where it's like, oh, they all look and feel the same. So if you like it, that means the next one that it already feels like a warm blanket, you know?
Well, and I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead into your theory, but I will say that one thing that struck me as I was reading it is that Shrek 2 is a little bit on an animation continuum that might start with Aladdin. Aladdin might be the first film that's doing some of the ideas that you're talking about in animation.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Considering that the director and writers of Shrek and Shrek 2, at least one, I think two of them, wrote Aladdin.
Did they really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, yeah. Wow, really? So these guys just have sort of a way of looking at entertainment that is unique. That's interesting. Anyway, hi, this is Directorpiece Theater. I'm Adam Ganzer, one of your hosts. Shrekking it up with the ogre of my eye. Introduce yourself, ogre. And
I'm the ogre. I thought you were gonna make me donkey, but I'll be ogre.
Sometimes you're a protagonist. Today you're the protagonist.
Yeah, I'm the protagonist. I'm Abe Epperson, and I have a theory.
Yeah, you do.
That I want to bring to you all.
And I'm excited about it.
As per this show, I wrote a thing after watching a thing. Now I'm going to read a thing, and you're going to listen to a thing.
You're going to like that thing. And it's about Shrek 2.
I watched Shrek 2 recently.
So did I.
Yeah.
Shrek 2.
Just want everyone to know that. And so, and it made me realize I was like thinking about comedy and like where we're at and what are the big, you know, broad strokes of comedy today, and what were they 10 years ago and what were they 20 years ago, because we're coming up here on the 20-year anniversary of Shrek 2. 2004.
That's dark.
And it made me realize, it put me in this kind of like 20-year perspective of comedy. I'm like, okay, because 2004 is like kind of when I started. I'm not saying that Shrek 2 caused me to be a comedian. But I will say
those words are on the internet now.
But yeah, there's something about comedy at this time that it was very clear what like the trends were. And then we saw those trends kind of formulate and create new things, new trends. We get tired of old hats and throw them away. New toys appear. And I kind of want to put that in perspective about like where we're going and where
we've been.
We are now. Exactly. We've been all that stuff. And in order to dissect that, I kind of had to think about, okay, like what are the contributing factors to what we would call comedy in this era? And stumbled upon this term that some of you may have heard of called postmodernism.
And how are they all Shrek 2?
And so I wanted to talk about the postmodern masterpiece that is Shrek 2.
Yeah.
And I didn't pick Shrek 1.
I noticed
and
that.
I'll tell you why later.
I noticed that. Okay.
I just want that to be intentional.
Yeah,
I picked Shrek 2 specifically.
I want you to know this is my first exposure to what we're calling comedy, by which I mean Shrek 2. Because I'd never seen it until this episode, which is often
so you didn't
true.
Even know?
Which is often, I've been working in comedy, never really knew what it was until today.
No, yep. That's something we all knew. He's a savant in a way. Because he kept making great jokes, and we're like, you know what you're doing is comedy, and he's like, I don't know what that is.
He's like, don't bother me. I will say, I'm surprised how little Mike Myers does Scottish accent jokes there are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'd seen Shrek 1, obviously, but and I felt like there was a little bit of, not exactly this joke, but the hey, no thing, there's a little bit of that. There's almost none of it in this movie.
Donkey.
Yeah, there's almost no, it's funny that he's doing a Scottish accent.
I think it's because they played with that in Shrek 1. And so they were like,
now let's do a new thing.
Now we need a new thing.
We're going to call it comedy.
Which I give credit to the writers. Compliments to the chef. Yeah. Always change it up, baby.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about.
There's 4 of them, by the way. There's 4 writers on this script.
These movies were always made by committee.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about postmodernism, and I want a lot of people know what that is. But if you don't, let's kind of get into the broad strokes or the way that I'll be talking about it, which is that, obviously you have this concept of modernism. And so postmodernism is this reaction to what they thought modernism was, which was stuffy and upper class. And it kind of had these values or principles that are always true regardless of genre. These are the values. And you follow these things. And that's what story is. And so from a filmmaking perspective, the cinematic mechanics of modernism are basically things that came before. And specifically in the eras where they were telling us this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to do it. And one of the things about postmodernism throughout many artistic forms, because you got it in painting and whatnot, it's got an emphasis on the viewer is one of the big things. Because they want you to look at yourself as a participant in the art. You have a whole lexicon of cinematic knowledge. You've seen it all before, so to speak. So when we get things that start cropping up in the 90s and early 2000s, like Simpsons, Family Guy, and genre parodies like Naked Gun, these all contributed to this kind of a single postmodernist tenet, which is referential humor. And usually it's done in the form of parody. And that's another way of saying you're taking the wind out of the sails of whatever you're lampooning. It's also, I'll mention the era that we got, Oscar shows did it in mass, award shows, MTV. Remember those MTV Jack Black, sketches and stuff. Music videos even did it. I'm looking at you like Foo Fighters.
Oh yeah. Arrested Development did a lot of this. Yeah.
There's this big tendency to be you, the viewer, have a knowledge about I don't know, this. Remember a scene in a horror movie where it goes like this? And it's yeah, I do know that. And it's yeah, I'm not going to act like you don't. So let's just quickly quote that. Now you're on the movie's level. Now let's play and break and do all these other things with it. And that's kind of in a nutshell one aspect of postmodernism. And that's why in the 90s and 2000s we got this kind of swarm of references. And they usually had an irreverent reference towards the tropes of the past. And now we're all kind of like in 2023, we're all kind of postmodern babies making postmodernist renewals of our own. Like who knows what we're doing, and that's probably a topic for another day. Just the concept of how revolutions of art kind of like tire the audience and how culturally we move to other things. But at this time, and seminal to kind of how we are now in comedy, is this concept of debunking the value of playing to a certain expectation.
Okay.
The concept of saying, nah, throw that out, because that's a reference to a thing, and I don't give a shit about like the reverence of that reference. Let's just throw it all out. And so in order to do this, the filmmakers behind Shrek 2 used several techniques. I think that they did this, and none of this stuff is new. Arguably, this is as old as some of the tropes that they're subverting. But I want to talk about how Shrek 2 rebuilds tropes and known sequences in the mind of the viewer by just using, like, at first, like ad hoc mimicry, using camera in the same way that the reference does. But it also can be less specific and based off the tropes. Like the expectations or fear of the audience, to get them in that mentality of like, oh, I'm supposed to feel this way because the music's playing a certain way or something like that. So there's different techniques you can use just to kind of get the audience in a right mindset. And then the next technique, and what Shrek 2 really does, and its bread and butter really is subvert those tropes by just adding a punchline. And this is straight out of like The Simpsons or whatnot. It's not only is this trope that we're talking about in the case of Shrek 2, it's the idea that fairy tales are a way to be successful and happy, to live out the kind of preordained vision on rails of you're a princess and you marry a handsome prince, and then you're going to be happily ever after.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that is.
So,
that's what that means, right? Life on rails after that.
Right. So in the true postmodern sense, Shrek 2 is saying that's not true. So not only are we going to use postmodern tactics, but the very thought itself we wish to subvert. It's untrue to this world. And it's usually from a plot perspective, the opposite of what the catalog of tropes is usually implied. Like, so let's go back to like old style literature, classic literature. An evil person is also ugly, right? That was a thing.
Yep.
And then we just started to debunk that. And we said, well, what about if we made a play about an ugly person, but they're a hero? See, that's the thing. Art's never complex. That's like one of the things I always yell at the top of my apartment building. There's just a lot of it. It's just art is not that complex.
Certainly not pop art like movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, for sure. So I want to kind of talk about how Shrek 2 does this, and it's kind of amazing.
I'm so excited. I love that you picked this movie for this conversation. It's just it's so perfectly Abe. It's like you got us both in a tuxedo to watch Shrek 2.
Yes, I did.
All right, great.
We're gonna have steak and asparagus.
Of course we are.
Watch Shrek
and
2.
It's gonna be the leanest, most French cut there is of steak. Yeah, I'm ready.
And I'm going to buy a fancy bottle of wine and then tell you about like the smells I get from it.
That's an hour
but
after
I'm going to be
this.
tgoing wrong. Yeah. I'm totally going to be wrong.
You're not going to know. Because nobody knows anything about wine.
I don't know about wine is something that I usually say into a wine glass.
I don't know about wine.
So let's talk about this. And it's a term, I couldn't find it on the internet. It's very strange because it was like ingrained in my head in my studies.
Okay.
This phrase, hyper quotationalism.
Yeah.
Which I think you can probably extrapolate what that means.
It's certainly in critical theory books somewhere.
It's somewhere, but when I searched it on the internet, I was like, where did the origin of this word come from? And it was like, I don't know. The internet was just like, I've never heard that.
Up. You're making it up.
And I was like, are you catfishing me, Google? So I want to kind of talk about that and how you kind of like approach like pastiche or like spoofs, right? And we'll get into parody in a bit, But I think there's a distinction between parodying something and outright just quoting it because it's fun to do. Most Shrek jokes are hyper-quotationalism. They're just kind of pastiche. It's just a reference to something, and then they like usually plug in something from the modern zeitgeist. It doesn't play for any distinctive satire or even build a sequence to undermine your expectation. It's more of just a mashup than anything else. But it kind of still gives you the feeling that the storytellers are irreverent toward the source material, or just in general any source material, in a way. Because like everything's just whatever. It's fun. You can just, I don't know, you just throw that reference in there and throw that reference in there. And there's so many examples of it.
I would say that's ultimately the Family Guy aesthetic. You know, it's sort of this is, by the way, what South Park was so pissed off about at Family Guy is
right. Wow. Say the quiet part loud.
I mean, well, right?
You're right though. You're right.
Like
You're
it's quoting stuff without comment.
There is legitimate satire, I'll say, 100%. In Family Guy, 100%. But like when you compare it to something like South Park or The Simpsons, not so much.
The joke is we did the thing. You know,
a lot of aggrieved comedians came out and lashed out against that. That's why we're kind of laughing about it. Is that like, it's people hate it because it became a dominant form of entertainment. I'm not here to really say what's.
I'm just sort of putting a finger on like a place this has been publicly talked about,
right?
And that's probably the most famous one.
And I'll go through a few quickly in Shrek too.
Yeah.
Like right off the bat, Donkey, as they're traveling to Far, Far Away, which is that, you know, Shrek and Fiona, after the first one, they've fallen in love. They're ogres living in the swamp. And we get a little scene where it's like, hey, this is who they are, just to refresh you. But then they get the inciting incident is they get a call from Fiona's parents to come back to Far, Far Away, which is where she comes from. Her parents, the king and queen, are basically want to see her because they haven't seen her. And they want to see, I think that at some point they're like, we also want to hear about your knight in shining armor. So, you know, it's guess who's coming to dinner. But Donkey, as they're driving through, sings Rawhide. I don't know why he's singing Rawhide.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah.
Far, Far Away itself, I think, is a reference to, I want to say Star Wars, just because a galaxy far, far away. I think it's literally low-hanging fruit like that. In the Fairy Godmother's first musical number, we see like Prince Charles as a possible suitor in her mirror. It's just a basic knock on the royal family. I don't think it has there's no parody here. It's just, hey, look at that. That's funny. It'd be funny to think Prince Charles is like Prince Charming, right? At one point we see Shrek kind of examining Fiona's room that, you know, is still kind of furnished with her childhood, you know, knickknacks and journals and whatnot, and there's a poster of Sir Justin, as in Sir Justin Timberlake,
incredible,
which is perfect.
Yeah, why not?
And it's just example of modern royalty and a modern prince, so that kind of is getting into parody. Really, but I would say still no.
It's really just saying Justin Timberlake's here.
He's here and he's handsome,
right?
And that's the problem,
right?
Yeah. In the first attack from Puss in Boots, he gets under Shrek's t-shirt and he blasts out, and I think that's a reference to the Xenomorphs and Alien, obviously,
100%.
It's like literally the same place. And it's just like small stuff in general, like when escaping the potion room, Puss in Boots leaps under the collapsing door and quickly grabs his hat, a la Indiana Jones. Or when Shrek slams the window at Prince Charming and Fiona when she's taken the potion. That's like feels straight out of The Graduate, that shot. And
it probably is, right? Like,
I think so. He's like, Fiona, and it's like he's hitting it in the same way that Dustin Hoffman hits it. And Puss in Boots says at one point, "I hate Mondays," which is just only funny because he's a orange tabby cat.
Yeah, he's an orange tabby cat, right?
So it's just like, hey, that's funny. So that's like a lot of the jokes, and that is what I would call hyper quotationalism. It's pastiche, it's parody, or it's not parody, it's more spoof. And another masterpiece we covered on this show is The Mask.
Thank you.
And I would
All
say
right.
basically the late 90s were super dense with this in a lot of comedies. Even going back to like Naked Gun, it never goes out of style because it's not contingent on you even following the movie. It makes for a high joke ratio, and it basically signals once again that nothing is sacred. But importantly, it's postmodern because it elevates the viewer as like everything, the entertainment is contingent upon you, and what's more you, the audience, than the modern zeitgeist.
That's
But this
interesting.
movie also does parody in a different postmodern way. That the story arc itself and the aspects of the world are meant to satirize, kind of with a purpose. And this is where the theory starts becoming like, oh, is this actually really smart? Is this movie really actually smart? And I think it actually is. Because I want to talk about how they do irony and why they do irony, which is the more important part. So the replication of tropes that aren't necessarily distinctive references, but rather play on the expectations of several works in the past that have built our, in our heads, our expectation towards a certain thing. So that's something that is necessary for satire in order for us to understand, it's how metaphor works, right? Because it's like, oh, they're making it look like that. Now that I think about it, that's true about the thing in real life.
Yeah. Like they're actually using it in a commentary kind of way.
Right. So there's two real ways to do this. One is direct parody and one is more of an indirect parody. And I don't mean like what they're going for, but more of like how they tackle the trope. And I'll kind of like parody. So we all recognize a particular branded iconography, and that can just be in hyper quotationalism. But parody becomes something more when it's saying like, okay, there's a trope here. I'm isolating that trope, replaying it for you. But that trope isn't necessarily something specific that you can identify from a particular movie, but it's something that I'm aware of just by being around stories for my whole life. So let's talk about the easy one first, which is that this movie does direct parody, and it does a lot of them. And the first one does a lot of them, but this one does even more. One of the first ones we get is there's a red carpet sequence with Joan Rivers narrating the processions of celebrities for the Far, Far Away ball. And it's on the Medieval Entertainment Channel, which looks like E, Yeah. And it's kind of it's something I'm going to get into more when we talk about like why they're doing this. But basically what they're doing with Far, Far Away is they're showing how the superficial nonsense that is Far, Far Away, it's somehow alluring to people watching at home. And so it's kind of trying to take the wind. It's once again trying to isolate the thing in which it wants to lampoon and the systems that are tertiary surrounding that system, or that like thing, that trope that they're lampooning. How to let's take a artifact of it and let's parody that artifact so that people will know, the metaphor, the thing that they're making fun of is the topic. It's not necessarily the red carpet.
Well, there's
sort of a red carpet says.
There's sort of a larger construct here that I think you're pointing at, which is that like they conceived of the land of Far, Far Away as Hollywood,
exactly,
and continued like they did so many references to Hollywood that is not necessarily the way we would conceive of like a medieval kingdom from a fairy tale. Like that construction has a lot of meaning in it that actually retroactively changes how the story feels. Like, and again, that's not the only way the story had to be constructed just from the script, I would say.
It doesn't have to. Why is it LA?
Why is it LA?
Because they want to show it as a vapid, shallow tourist trap.
Right.
They want it to be something that is easy to lampoon. They also, as filmmakers, have thoughts on LA. And
They
this is
sure
where the
do.
postmodernism kind of comes into. And that's more of an indirect parody because it's mainly to point out that the facade of fairy tales and the expectations that love, wealth, happiness are easy are flawed and very surface deep. We get another direct parody, which is Cops/Knights,
that was
which is fun as hell.
one of a trillion parodies of Cops. There were so many.
So many at the time because it's so easy to do because it shows the kind of hilariously inappropriate coverage of the show Cops while at the same time shows that this place is a police state, which is something it's wanting to point out. There's a parody of Mission Impossible at one point where Pinocchio breaks Shrek free, and he mimics the vertical descent of Ethan Hunt while they play the music, literally, and it's one of the funnier sequences in the movie.
That was the most on-the-nose quotation in the movie, I would say. That particular
that's a good
one.
Pun. It's a Pinocchio pun. I love it.
You got it.
You
got it.
The last one I want to point out is Frankenstein's sequence with the huge gingerbread man, and he goes, "It's alive." I almost put this in the hyper quotational section, since I don't think it's saying anything other than a funny reference, but it's part of the plot, and I think it's important that where we're getting to this.
Is it a Stay Puft? Is it a Stay Puft reference? Is there a Stay Puft reference there? Like it?
There is kind of a Stay Puft.
I feel like they might have stolen
too.
a shot of Stay Puft.
Yeah, it's that actually probably would go in like the indirect parody kind of vibe. You're absolutely right, because that's the other thing that the filmmakers are really good at is they kind of they pastiche like several things together at once.
Yeah, they can kind of merge a real life reference, a movie reference, and the plot of the movie together in one scene or shot in a very seamless way. It's actually pretty impressive.
Another example of that very thing, and an example of indirect parody, is like Fairy Godmother's workshop is stacked with indirect references to Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, like the way the walls look, and like the humdrum workers, like the Oompa Loompas. That's the thing, is that the indirect parody now starts forming, where we can kind of infer that she's evil. They all kind of have a purpose now. Also, when the fairy godmother, speaking of how she's evil, abducts the king to like, remember, we have a deal. You're a frog, and at any time I can turn you back. There's thugs in the car, and it's just generally referencing gangster movies. Like, she's now aligned in our mindset as the far, far away mafia, basically.
Well, so like again, I think you've wisely put your finger on the pulse of a really important critique here, which is like they're so detailed in lampooning Los Angeles that you kind of have to feel like what they're actually telling us more about Los Angeles than we want to know. Like the idea that she actually is sort of a thug with like a cabal of mafia types is telling us something we probably don't want to know about Los Angeles, right? And if you think
they might,
like if you, by the way, as a movie viewer, don't think this is explicitly Los Angeles, I need you to know the entire town looks almost identical to 3rd Street Promenade. And it's not an accident. It's like, that is 3rd Street Promenade. That's what it's supposed to be.
And 3rd Street Promenade is known for being the most manicured street, basically.
Almost
next to some sections of Sunset. Yeah. Some sections of Sunset in the entire LA.
Almost
area.
Every promenade in every major city is basically modeled off of 3rd Street Promenade because it's like the mecca of that.
You're such a homer.
I am a homer. You're right. I am an LA homer. But I'm saying that because it's true, though. Like,
I think you're probably right about that because LA versus any other town in the world has influence in a unique way on the zeitgeist of other areas because just through the movies and storytelling and all that.
I'm sure that LA didn't invent promenades.
New York is the other one.
Yeah, right. I'm sure LA didn't invent promenades, by the way. Like, don't at me if there's one in France or something that's more famous. I'm just saying that right now, zeitgeist-wise, the promenade is like an iconic spot, and they clearly are
one in France. Isn't it a French word? It
probably is.
I think that's probably a sealed deal right there. It's probably a promenade in France.
I don't want to hear it.
See, we're smart guys. We're smart guys. You should listen to us.
We know everything about movies. No, but
I want to finish outlining
I
these
do too.
indirect parodies.
I just want to like sharpen the thing I'm saying. So like
Mhm.
that, like in some ways, like everything kind of retrofits to this is actually a critique of Los Angeles and the Hollywood culture. And there's so
Yes.
many retrofits that actually tell us more about Hollywood than you'd think because of that.
Yeah, another
you know?
one is the Farbucks coffee
so
joke.
good.
People run
Yeah,
from
it's great.
Farbucks to another one just to escape the
Across the
huge,
street.
gingerbread.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and at that time that was like a tight, fresh like joke.
And it was true.
Like, starbucking is now just a term for it. But yeah, so there's a lot of auxiliary world building parodying being done, and this is all indirect because it's not specifically saying like, that one scene in that one, like in Alien when he bursts out of his chest, it's not doing that. It's just doing general kind of parody work. And this is all leading up to something. Last one I want to mention, because Puss in Boots is important to the story, even in a postmodern way, is that the build-up, they build him up to be an Aragorn type.
Right.
Which they don't parody the exact scene, but we are aware through things like Lord of the Rings, because it just came out 2001, I want to say, right? Was Fellowship?
Yeah, it
of
was
the
right
Ring
around
and
that
had
time.
scene where Aragorn is this dark, shadowy figure in a bar, and the king goes to the bartender to find him, and we get this poetic speech building up the danger and fear that Puss in Boots elicits, and this sets up so that the eventual punchline we see later in the clarity of day, that it's just the dark shadowy figure is just
he's
a
little
little
kitty cat.
And they're going to do more with that.
Played wonderfully by
wanna-
Antonio Banderas.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
It's one of the funniest parts.
There's a
of the
lot
movie.
of Mask of Zorro quotes in this movie, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
A movie
That,
we've
once
also
again, hyper quotationalism.
we've also a masterpiece we covered on
We
this
have talked
podcast.
about the Mask of Zorro.
Yeah.
You're right. Something I want to note before we move into like the real meaty stuff is that I wanted to note that parody can be, I think it's important for people who do seek kind of like clarity on parody, is that it can be an action or a series of film mechanics, but it doesn't have to be both. In the case, like, let me explain what I mean. In the case of Puss in Boots bursting out of Shrek's shirt like a xenomorph, the shot isn't important. There's no musical cue. What's important in that reference is the bursting out of the shirt, the action itself. So the movie doesn't go to painstaking,
it's a medium
recreation
close-up.
of that moment.
It's got to be a medium close-up. Right.
No, it
Right,
doesn't care.
Exactly.
It's just like, no, you'll get it as a part of the other stuff.
Right.
And whereas the Cops parody is, there's no action that really would make it feel explicitly like Cops. Maybe there's some blocking that some cops could do or whatever, but it's strongest when it's more of like, it's a video filter, camera zooms, the soundscape, the music. And I think it's important that the filmmakers are able to identify what makes a parody connect with us and doesn't attempt to do anything else. It just doesn't overstay its welcome. It says, like, what do you need? What's the quickest way for me to universally get everyone onto that's the parody that I'm doing? Well, decide if it's an action, decide if it's a format. Once you know that answer, follow that, fucking get
They
out.
definitely distill their references down to what is the most essential thing that needs to be shown
Yes.
to get the joke here. And they don't care about the rest of it enough to do more.
And that's one of the other things that it's like, creating film by committee is actually kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think
You just throw jokes
the
in
best
there.
idea you just throw jokes out until the best one wins.
It's how
and
most-
then you go, okay, that's the only one.
Most comedy stuff is improved by a committee of writers, at least.
Yes.
like
I would say.
Yeah.
Most type of comedy.
Most types of comedy, right? With some rare exceptions, but like all of this is really sending me back to The Simpsons, and why
Yep,
The Simpsons is
that's
so
right.
important, because it's like The Simpsons is really pioneering a lot of these techniques in adult television. You know. Anyway.
So let's talk about also one of the things that's near and dear to the Shrek franchise and to postmodernism itself is this beneficial trick that a lot of modern parodies use, which is trope kind of awareness and character self-consciousness. the characters themselves think like we think about their lot in life. So let's look at a few
Like
examples.
they share a
of what I
modern
mean by that.
sensibility? Is that what you mean by that?
They think like so someone who so now we're talking tropes, right?
Okay.
And let's
Yeah,
take
yeah.
the first example of the barkeep in that bar in the Aragorn kind of scene.
that one.
Is the ugly stepsister, right? So there's a self-awareness about the concept of the ugly stepsister in those stories, right? Which is that she's ugly and she basically sucks. And that's silly. So in order to kind of subvert that, first off, they give us a very confident person who doesn't really care. But more importantly, they reference, like, their name is the ugly stepsister, and it's not said in a derogatory term. It just seems to be their name. So they're coming to their, like, if you think as the character's thinking, their thoughts are more akin to our thoughts watching their stories than it is to a real person leaving that story. Does that make sense?
So, like, I guess, and forgive me, I'm not trying to quibble with you here. Like,
No,
I
no,
feel
no.
like they were making a trans joke here, right?
I think they kind of are doing a trans joke here, yeah.
So, like, so maybe
there's a unibrow.
Well, I feel like it's expressly there, like that's the joke here, right? Is that like it's the ugly stepsister because she's trans?
Yeah.
So there's something a little bit. So in this case, I think it is a derogatory joke in that respect.
It is a derogatory joke, and
the character does.
It's not a great.
Yeah. The character does embrace it, and that's unique to this.
That's the consciousness.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Talk about.
Yeah, the character.
But that's just an example of like how they first do it.
Yeah.
A better example would be the first fight with Puss in Boots. There's a story with Puss in Boots that I think really exemplifies how the postmodern kind of pastiche works, which is that the first fight ends with him choking on a hairball.
Right.
And we just see a classic animation. It's not really a parody of anything. It's just a reference to, you know how cats look when they're throwing up. And it's kind of great because it shows how the movie can kind of do anything it wants and zig and zag at its own whim. Because first off, if we follow the beats, they built up the expectation that Puss in Boots was like a savage killer.
Right.
And then they undermine it with, oh, he's a cute kitty cat. And then they go, oh, looks like he's actually a savage killer. Oh, and now, no, he's just a cat, and he suffers cat problems and has hairballs. And then finally we get a moment where we get Puss in Boots, like he does his classic eye thing, where he like is super, super cute, which is hilarious and great. But all this goes to show that like some character development isn't really sacred. It's not a bad thing. In fact, it endears them to us. It makes us basically look at them and go, oh, they're messy and can be one thing at one moment and one thing at another moment, and that's all fine. And that's very near and dear to what Shrek 2 is trying to say, is that there's no one blueprint to life, right? And that's very postmodern. There's no one way to do any fucking thing. There's no categorization that matters.
There's no trope that restricts other tropes. Like this character can be both of these things even if they're somewhat contradictory.
Yeah, exactly.
And like that's fine because that's who he is. And in some ways that's how life is. So like
right.
Postmodernism is actually more true as a story technique in this way.
And that's why I think it came to fruition in the late 90s and 2000s, because that was very near and dear to the zeitgeist at the time, and it still is. It's just this is 2004. When Shrek arrives at the fairy godmother's workshop, he gets past the reception desk by posing as a representative of a magical workers' union, knowing that she definitely is benefiting from the hardship of others, which is another like, you know, not only is it's kind of like Comrades Shrek, but it's also like, it's specifically trying to point out the type of people who have power are people who manipulate. And that's something that it's because they say there's one way to do things. That's their manipulation.
That's interesting.
Fairy godmother pulls out some books at one point to prove, like, citing different fairy tales. You're not any of these fairy tales. You don't have
you, therefore
ogres don't get a happily ever after. And so she's aware of the totality of who she is in written form. She's seeing herself from a zeitgeist perspective, not from a real life. Like, we're supposed to believe and suspend our disbelief that this is a real person. She literally is throwing tomes of her history at
She's
him.
quoting media at him as though he is bound by media, but she is not.
Exactly. And
that's interesting.
That's the rub. Yeah. That's the postmodern, like, fuck you. And in general, in the movie, most NPCs, I would call them, just aren't happy in their life. They got the shit end of the stick. At one point, there's like 2 tree ents or whatever, like arm wrestling, and one of their arms breaks. You know, I love that scene in the bar, because there's also the headless horseman who's a drunk and he like hiccups and spits out some beer. Like, we're displaying them with, like, we want to show them with their kind of, you know,
their guards down,
show them in a,
if you will, like in a casual moment.
A little bit.
Yeah.
In a casual moment, because it's funny, and that's haha Shrek jokes. But it's all kind of leaning towards one thing, which is to say that this is a bad system. The last one I like is that Pinocchio, they use Pinocchio in a clever way in this movie, because once he descends a la Mission Impossible, he has to get one of the mice over to because he's suspended in the middle of this oubliette, so he has to like make his nose long, and so they keep doing a joke about him, you know, telling a lie about wearing women's underwear, and it's not exactly an intended use of his nose powers, I guess, but like he's aware of telling a lie will get them out of this situation. Other characters around him are saying, "Yeah, just
you know
do the
your
lie
thing.
so we can
you know your
your
deal,
thing."
Pinocchio. Like,
exactly. So it's kind of embracing the archetypes and the categorization, but at the same time saying like it's an essential part of postmodernism and stories like this that characters are self-aware in this way. Because if they're not, then it's just like people dunking on people, you know, just making fun of the tropes. Which is boring and mean-spirited.
And I mean, also, like, it's not part of the history of these kind of references before they were postmodern quotations either. Like, references always started out as a kind of reverent nod at the thing that you're referencing.
Homage,
right? And I think they're still doing that here, pretty much. You know.
Yeah, that's the thing, is we kind of found there's a time where we found a pretty good place to like do both. It's very strange, and I think that there's a reason why they do that, and how they do it is interesting as well, because it's very simple. I'm gonna get into it in a second, but I just one last thought on the character's seriousness or self-consciousness. Is it adds to the effect that the system that everyone's playing the rules of make no sense. Which, you know, as I mentioned, is a very postmodern principle. The definition of things become, in a postmodern world, inclusive versus exclusive. And the whole arc in the movie is based off the self-consciousness of the movie. That Prince Charming was supposed to save Fiona, but Shrek did. It was how it was, quote, supposed to be. That's what they're fucking with. And that is kind of that's when parody gets good, is when it becomes weaponized kind of subversion. And it's also in this movie, which is why I keep pointing out that it's like, this might be sneaky good, is that it's at the heart of the movie. Like, it's literally the arc itself. So the theme of Shrek 2, and really the whole series, is that in order to be happy, the question is, do you have to fit in a particular box? Right. And of course, the series posits that you do not, that happiness is not based off the artificial and normative system of fairy tale expectation, but rather just embracing yourself and foiling the agents of that expectation, or the agents of them at that normalcy. And it's literally, in the case of Shrek 2, which is why I chose Shrek 2 versus Shrek 1, it is literally a postmodern fairy tale. This is the main arc of this movie covers Shrek and Donkey becoming charming, like Prince Charming, and a beautiful stallion by drinking a potion that expires at midnight. The subversion is literally the Cinderella story, but it's a male ogre, I guess. Now, Shrek 1 also plays with those tropes, but they change details. It's more of like there's a princess in a castle, and there's a dragon, and you're gonna get saved by a knight, and it's fate. But like, what if it was an ogre? So that's changing a detail of the story. This is different. This is literally saying, what if we took the Cinderella story and made it true, but in a completely different way? And that's the postmodernism aspect of this of this movie, I think, is telling us specifically these are the things that the movie actually means to say, versus this is just the nonsense hyper quotationalism, just making you laugh. So I want to look at that part, and I just want to. So when you watch Shrek 2 again, how does the movie signify beats that are like our characters in turmoil or like real conflict? In other words, the movie moments that like wish us to sympathize with Shrek and Fiona and, et al. Because this barrage of referential humor is really just going for a laugh, and you need something to be like, okay, so what's the heart of this movie? And the film does it very simply. It's not a complex thing. Art is not complex. It basically builds sequences of heart or reference for the story. Basically, like all films, they basically build reverence and heart in certain ways, and it's mimicking those films. This is something that is also postmodernist. Just the concept that like, okay, we're mimicking all these other films, so what do we need to do when we're trying to, recreate heart or like meaning? Well, what do other films do? Let's parody that as well.
That's interesting.
In a way.
So like, does that mean because this film has structurally embraced a kind of grab bag of quotationalism as it's like,
I think it needs to.
So then
stay.
Yeah, so it has to stay in that to do.
I think so. Otherwise, it would feel weird.
Yeah, you can't like pivot away from it to do like, now we're going to be sincere. This is not going to be a quote. It's going to be original to Shrek.
Which is why you do get a lot of those random spoof jokes in these sequences that have heart, because they're easy one-off that you can just drill out.
They create a kind of continuity between the different aesthetics.
Exactly. So continuity is very important, because even when it's sincere, it's already broken the fourth wall of replicating tropes so often. So it can continue to replicate those tropes, but now it's a replication of montages and sequences in movies that we recognize as emotionally significant, right? And obviously music is really helpful for this. The movie opens with a Counting Crows song.
Yeah.
Accidentally
Counting
love.
Crows.
Counting Crows, to show the real love between Shrek and Fiona. That's a honest beat. We're supposed to believe that, right? There's another moment where Shrek has a crisis of faith in the marriage, because in the first night he's staying in Far, Far Away, he doesn't think that he's necessarily the proper husband to a princess, and we hear an Eels song, I Need Some Sleep, which is a very sullen track, while he examines her childhood life in Scrapbook, none of which picture anything resembling her life with Shrek. So we get right there, that's the, conflict. And then we get a legitimate heart-wrenching score for the sequence that transforms Shrek into like a charming prince, which is kind of the cost and like the premise of the movie. So it's almost like the movie puts goggles on in these moments and says, this is important now, which breaks the very format of classic storytelling. You're not supposed to do that because that would break the suspension of disbelief. So once again, this is a postmodern trait.
Interesting. Because it's kind of also the opposite too. It is what you're saying, and it's also the opposite.
It's
doing
right.
the movie trope now.
The thing about breaking systems, if you make a system of breaking systems, it's still a system,
right? You can never get away from it
right.
if you want this to be coherent.
Yeah, you have to make something that's entertaining is the other thing that they're doing. So they have to make fun of themselves. Now, I really do see a kind of nail in the coffin. Like I kind of want to talk about now, or I just had some last minute conclusions about like where we are now and where Shrek was in 2004. I feel like this is the nail in the coffin of like subversion tactics of this era. I'm not saying it died after this. I'm just think that they like reached the heights and then there was no like beating this. I think Shrek 2 did it, and there's things that did it before, but after this we kind of left it. If you look at the movies, I think Shrek and Shrek 2 are more sneaky influential than we assume. I know it's not the first nor it's the last, but in 2004 we kind of got this masterpiece of postmodernism that like is both in its point and by its actions and mechanics postmodernism through and through. And then we said, all right, enough of that. We're going to play with something else. Because we got a few more attempts to cash in on the Enterprise, but then it fizzled out. We got like Tropic Thunder, which does a lot of this. The Zoolanders do a lot of this. But then like the 2010s hit, and we embraced this like meta conversation where we got a little bit more personal, because we didn't want to disguise ourselves as tropes or define ourselves as archetypes, which is a postmodern trait, but we didn't want to think of ourselves as tropes. Like we didn't want to even talk about the tropes being wrong. A movie I think about when I think about this aspect is I think 2010 or maybe 11. Kick-Ass.
Yeah,
have you seen that? It's kind of and that kind of jump-started that era. Superbad as well, where it's like we're not making fun of the old. Like this is a parody, but it kind of isn't, because it doesn't really parody the tropes of the thing that it's coming from. It's not, because even postmodernism is still obsessed with modernism.
Postmodernism
right?
is still
its definition.
Is still reacting to something.
Exactly,
and we're kind of,
which is I think we moved
we're
away
leaving
from
that behind. Yeah, like if you watch things like most Marvel movies now, like they're all kind of leaving the grounding of the thing that they're reacting to behind. Like I would argue the multiverse itself as a concept is a postmodern construct. You know?
Yeah. And like people bring up like Rick and Morty,
of course,
definitely still had parody episodes, but think about how much time and his intention is in creating something new. I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing. That like that's where we are. I'm saying like that's where we are right now in like the modern perspective, that we've left this kind of postmodern kind of involvement.
We've left this
obsession.
Version of postmodernity.
Yeah.
I would say we're still in postmodernity because like I would call Rick and Morty ultimately like the most postmodern thing we've done so far in some ways, because it's no longer interested in doing narrative. It's only interested in talking about the tropes of narrative. You know?
Yeah, that I think it's a new form of something, but I definitely, there's definitely postmodern traits in it, and I think for all the reasons that we've been talking.
Like later, you think later film historians will call it some other thing that's not postmodernism?
I think so. I think
I think that.
Whatever thing they define, whatever period we're in, you know, we've talked a lot about post cinema. I think they'll say there's postmodern aspects of it, but I don't think they'll call it thoroughly postmodern in the same way that like Shrek 2 is or Naked Gun is.
In that it's abandoning the endeavor to do a story by way of trope, nodding at tropes.
Yeah, I think what I mean is that like films these days, or at least in the late 2010s to 2020s, films didn't as much react against being something, but asserted that a genre or an expectation has nothing to say about your identity. Like the game is so rigged that like who gives a shit in any particular way. We aren't even going to compare ourselves to what we're quote supposed to be. We're just going to be ourselves and have fun. And I look at like things like The Hangover. And it becomes clear to me that in genre of comedy in general, it's become less important to subvert a tactic
That's true.
You know, it's more about the jokes, and it's just the jokes, and about people having a good time and getting, you know, they usually have a point. It's like being together is great. You know, it's something simple, but ultimately it's not trying to say like, you remember how that movie came out and like everyone thought that thing about that thing. Well, fuck that movie.
Yeah, well, here's a dumb.
And I'm gonna make a
here's
movie
how it's dumb or stupid.
Spit in its face. And this is not something that hasn't like not happened in the past or won't happen again. It's just a noticeable pivot in movies that I think we've made. And then in the 2010s, we kind of got things changed because we got the middle tier budget comedies just died a pretty steep death. But
the
TV
middle tier
was still
budget
going
movies died a steep death.
Right. And in the postmodern kind of archetype, I think what we got after like post, I would say like the first version of it would be like a Seinfeld. And I think that's directly connected to something like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is still on the air. But that's a postmodern ethic. Something like Ted Lasso right now, like to being made today, or Abbott Elementary, it's not necessary. We don't need like assholes to laugh at. We don't need to look at a format and say, oh, okay, these, because like if you look at like Seinfeld, it was like, look at Cheers, look at Married at Children, look at any number of these old comedies, TV comedies. They're all fucking like assholes, right? That was the posit of Seinfeld. And they made a show about nothing because they were like, how insignificant can we make these people? And then we went and ran with it in the craziest way possible till we got to like, you know, South Park and It's Always Sunny. But like, anyway, it's unclear where the next pivot will be or how long like feel good comedies will be dominant over the like It's Always Sunny type assholes or the workplace documentary style like The Office. And it's especially hard since things seem to only speed up in comedy recently, from what I think is due to the referential humor of the internet. Right. But who knows? That's a whole nother topic. Whatever the case, my conclusion is that the bread and butter of Shrek and Shrek 2 are indicative of that movement in comedy films away from a particular genre of comedy and more towards the postmodern ethic of movies. Kind of like how The Simpsons did and such. But that doesn't make Shrek 2 any less of a like postmodern masterpiece, because like every part of its DNA is specifically this one thing. And it's kind of great.
And it still believes in it's still trying to do a movie. You know what I mean? Like it hasn't abandoned doing a movie. Like creating the emotions and story catharsis of a movie. It's just going about it in an entirely quotationalist trope acknowledging anti-structuralist methodology. But there are things that are abandoning doing a movie now. You know, like Shrek 2 is not doing that. Like and I'm not trying to so everything you said is great and I love it. But again, like, and I know people got mad at me about this, but like Ant-Man, this most recent movie, is I think in some ways abandoning doing a movie. You know, like it's not even really, it's really just sort of like, here's all the plot elements, and the one thing you need to retain is a thing that's actually,
here are our favorite scenes.
Yeah, that's actually ancillary to the plot. It's that this guy showed up, and you know these details now. Right. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like the story is a very thin veil for a different endeavor that's not a story endeavor. You know, I mean, that's a very negative way of talking about a movie that I know people love and like, and good for you, you know, but on a continuum about how do we tell a meaningful story, that's, I feel, pretty far on the other end of that spectrum, where like they're not really doing a story in some ways.
Yeah, they're not playing by the rules that we've come to accept, which is,
that's right.
You know,
yeah,
that's subversion.
It
right?
could be.
The whole idea is you need to subvert something, and what's something? Well, usually what's there or in power at the time. We can still love it. It can still be valuable. It's just anti-traditionalist.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. As long as it works. You know what I mean? And by works, I mean like it creates the feeling that stories give us.
Right, and I think that's something that everyone will decide for themselves what works.
To a degree.
It's highly subjective.
To a degree. And then
But
also
yeah,
not to a
it
degree,
also-
you know?
Not to a degree in that, like, some things are very popular. Shrek's did amazing. They did very well because people were very thirsty for him. Now, of course, we can all play that game where it's like, okay, so if you were Shrek 2 were to come out in 2023, would it do
No.
this well? No, of course not.
No,
It's
they wouldn't.
we're not primed. The culture is not designed for this kind of thing. Now, I would say you could still do a successful rendition of it. God, you could do a great version of it at any time. Anyone can do a great version of something, but it's the lightning rod. It's the idea that
being in touch with the audience that's going to see it. Is, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I think Shrek 2, from all I can tell, understood who was going to see it and what they wanted to see, and made a movie like that. You know, and
I
that's neither good nor bad. Ultimately, this is entertainment, and entertainment can be as simple as smashing two action figures together if people like watching it.
Right.
You know?
And I think that until like 2008, when we got Iron Man, and then we it became a whole new type of storytelling ethic. But I mean, like, the Harry Potters were happening during this, Lord of the Rings were happening during this. We got a lot of like, we also at the same time, that's the other thing, is that I think culture has to do this thing where it has two sides of itself. It has to enjoy the classic, the modernism, and it has to be postmodern at the same time, because that's just how our brains
It needs both voices.
It needs both
Yeah.
voices. We need to make fun of we can have reverence for, Frodo and Sam, but then at the same time just dunk on them left and right because it's funny to do so, because people have reverence for it, because it's a good thing. It was important for a lot of people. Lord of the Rings, very important. So, like, I don't know. I think that we never got that, like, time sense, that 2004 time, that prime, two things going on at once. That I'm not saying that it won't happen again, and I'm not saying that,
I think our whole young adulthood was that.
Yeah.
I think Seinfeld and Aladdin and a lot of the 90s,
right,
and certainly a lot of the 2000s was all this stuff.
Right.
And
I think this is like it kind of shut down after this, right? That's what I think I'm trying to get to, or that's my theory. And that's an auxiliary theory to, Shrek is postmodern, but that's kind of what I wanted to say.
If we're like labeling where film and comedy in particular is, I would say in some ways comedy is no longer feeling beholden to comment on anything but itself these days. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like even Rick and Morty, which is always doing tropes about tropes, like isn't as concerned with like commenting on, remember that thing from Spider-Man?
No, that's
all.
Exactly right. That's why I said it's not very postmodern, because it's not saying like, it wants to think of the next joke. That's the thing, right? Like Rick and Morty and stuff like Rick and Morty.
It will
make fun of itself and say, "Oh, we're gonna do 300 episodes, Morty." Oh, like that's
right.
It's making fun of itself, that itself is a parody. So it's this like Inception kind of thing, or it's rather, I should say, an Ouroboros kind of deal, where it's eating its own tail instead of eating some other tail.
Well, I think that that's actually what sort of makes it feel like it's actually locked in postmodernity in some way. Like certainly philosophically.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, that's the thing with like all these terms that we use to describe art, is that it's all just spectrum, and we divide these lines randomly at this one parameter.
It's just to try to make a meaningful
you're right.
way of talking about it, and I don't even know. Well, I mean, like philosophically, it all comes from this same sort of belief of that the postmodern philosophers have defined fairly clearly in the 60s and such and before.
Right.
Like it's all derivative of that. And I don't know, I'm not a savant on philosophy. I haven't read the newest, coolest papers, but I don't think anyone's moved into a new phase of philosophy yet. I haven't seen that or heard it.
I feel like, yeah, once we had the new thoughts are probably being had chasing new data on like things like technology stuff that's changing in our world.
One presumes
comedy doesn't really change. And once the internet was made, basically that's what I'm kind of alluding to. 2004, there was the internet, but then the internet really started to hit. Like we started freebasing that shit later in the 2000s, and that's when we didn't need movies to do things like Shrek 2 did, because we had memes. We were sated in a way. I think most of people who would go to a zeitgeist movie like this, and I know these are made for children, I'm just saying, like a lot of these jokes
I think they're
children.
made to work on a children's level, but also the postmodern aspect of it is so that an adult audience can also appreciate
also enjoy
like
it,
like in entertainment. In a way, postmodernity is a way of making your project feel more mass market. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
Actually kind of that's what's so clever about it.
That's kind of what's clever about it. Yeah. It's because I think it's sensational. It's always trying to approach it for like, okay, you audience, what are you looking for? Like the second that we had like Deschamps say like this is not a pipe, became the most popular fucking thing, right? Because it was like, what?
Of course.
What?
Of course.
And I don't think that we've really traveled that far to, all right, what do they think is funny? Oh, do a Matrix joke. Why? Because Matrix is like the biggest thing in the world. So that's going to make it sensational. They're going to have a reaction to it. They're going to love us because we're specifically speaking their language.
Well, I agree. I think in that way, entertainment will always trail whatever sort of pillars of meaning and language that our society constructs itself around. And we're sort of in a place still of these words are going to sound judgmental, but of unraveling our meaning structures. I think we're still doing that culturally, and as a result, entertainment's still reflecting that. It's just more. I think it's more interesting in a social context these days than in like a meta narrative context. But not everybody agrees with that. Look at Marvel. I think Marvel is like, no, it's actually only interesting if you build a world and then tear it apart in ways that make everything meaningless, but also could make anything possible. That's the experiment they're under right now.
Yeah, and that has to deal with. Man, we should really do another episode of Escape from the Multiverse.
We should do one about Marvel. I feel like Ant-Man might be a good one to talk about multiverse.
Probably. Yes, you just keep coming back to doing podcasts about Ant-Man.
I know. I don't want to spoil all the things that Dave and I said in that podcast, or all the thoughts that went into that podcast. But I will say, I actually think Ant-Man is a pretty good barometer for what entertainment is about right now.
Kind of State of the Union.
What are we willing to spend the most money on to generate income? That if as long as it's not Avatar, like Avatar, I would say is really more. What is James Cameron up to?
Yeah, just a maniac's dreams.
What does James Cameron want to do is what Avatar is about. And congratulations, he's wonderful at making money. He's so good at it. But Marvel feels like it's more structured around what do the movie-going audiences pay for, and what are they willing to pay for?
That's right.
That's the question.
So. And that's the question. But I just wanted to bring that theory to you.
Yeah, I loved it.
I just wanted to be like, hey, man, is Shrek 2 secretly really consistent and thorough and
secretly
fun?
Terrifying? I think I actually, the more that I thought about what they're saying about Hollywood, the better I thought this movie is.
Yeah.
Like, actually, all the hyper quotationalism becomes more of a direct parody when you put it in the blanket of this is them talking about how Hollywood is the wrong place to find happiness.
Right.
Like, that's what the movie's about, I would argue, more than anything else. Hollywood does not create happiness,
Yeah. They're They're just make-em-ups. It's a facade, baby.
Yeah, facade, baby.
Here in Tinseltown, where I live.
Where we all strive in the joke mines.
And we're happy, right? We're happy.
I'm as
right,
happy
Adam?
as I can be right now, Abe. As happy as I can be.
Well, you know what? Here's what I suggest to all you listening. If you're not happy, stop by patreon.com/smallbeans. Throw us a few dollars and you can access all of our exclusive content.
And
that's
buy
just
happiness.
We got a paywall going, everybody. Buy some happiness. You can do it. No, if you're stuck behind the free feed, you do get a lot of our stuff, more than most Patreons, I would say, or patron accounts. But there is still a ton of cool stuff you can listen to, including our newer shows. One was mentioned in this podcast, Escape from the Multicurse, where we discuss our current fascination with multiverses and parallel worlds and such. We also got Star Trek The Next Futurama, which combines those two shows. We have Spielboys, which, just kind of unpacks Spielberg's legacy. We got Inside Dads, which just talks about dad movies. We got I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Yeah.
Which is this guy yakking with Maggie May Fish, and they are delightful. And that's also got bonus episodes there too.
We started just making movie dates out of all of our episodes now. We just get together and watch the movies first now. I don't know when we started doing that, but it's like great. That's what we're doing every episode. We record now. Just getting together, watching a movie like pals.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Hey, this is the best way to live life, is the way I see it. Movies.
We're doing our best.
Friends.
We're definitely doing our best.
Everyone enjoy that, and thanks for listening to my weird, stupid theory about postmodernism and Shrek 2.
Oh, it was beautiful.
I think that's it. That's a episode, right?
That's enough for me. I'm good with it.
Thanks for listening, my friend, and also you friends out there in the ether.
We were happy to do it. And bye.